All right, let's dive in. We're tackling Maxims and Reflections by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe today.
Ah,
Have you heard of this one?
I am.
It's basically a gold mine of little bursts of insight from one of history's biggest brains.
Yeah, and what's cool about these maxims is how many different things they touch on.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about human nature, art, science, even politics and society.
Yeah,
It's like Goethe's giving us these peeks into how he saw the world.
yeah,
And it's amazing how much of it still makes sense today, centuries later.
yeah. And I mean, right off the bat, Goethe drops some pretty serious truth bombs about people, right? Well,
Yeah.
like one of the first things he says is that people act totally out of character when they're about to die.
Hmm.
That's Maxim 19.
Right.
Kind of makes you think, huh,
It does, yeah.
what is it about facing death that makes us drop the act?
Right, like, does it strip away everything fake, or is it some kind of last attempt to control how people will remember us? It's a pretty powerful observation.
Hmm.
And it really gets at how complicated we are as human beings.
And then he goes on to say that we, like, create flaws in ourselves to make other people feel better.
Oh, wow.
Maxim 20.
Okay.
Almost like we're more worried about making others comfortable than we are with just being ourselves?
And this was written ages ago, way before social media and all that pressure to look perfect online.
Right.
But it feels so relevant today, don't you think?
Oh, totally.
We're always seeing these images of everyone else being successful and happy.
Hmm.
And it's easy to feel like we have to measure up, even if it means hiding our strengths or achievements.
It's like that keeping up with the Joneses thing, but in reverse. We're
Exactly.
holding ourselves back so we don't, like, outshine the people around us.
Yeah.
I wonder if Goethe saw this as a weakness or more like a social strategy.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a bit of both. Right?
Yeah.
There's definitely some insecurity there, this fear of standing out or coming across as arrogant. But there's also this social intelligence,
Hmm.
this understanding that to fit in, you sometimes have to tone yourself down.
Yeah.
It's like this balancing act between being genuine and conforming.
Totally. Makes you wonder how much of that is just built into us versus learned from society, right?
Absolutely. It definitely says something about how strong social norms and expectations are,
Yeah.
and how they shape our behavior in these subtle but profound ways.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, Goethe also says that everybody's got enough strength to act on what they believe in.
Okay.
That's Maxim
All
110.
right. That's a little more uplifting.
Right.
It suggests that we do have the power to break free from those social pressures and live by our values.
Yeah.
But then it also raises the question,
Yeah.
what are those values?
Right.
And are they strong enough to guide our actions?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? Figuring out what we truly believe in and then having the guts to live by those beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
even when it's hard or makes us unpopular. It's a call to really look at our values and ask ourselves if they match up with what we do.
Right.
Are we actually living by them, or are we just talking a good game?
Ooh, that hits a little close to home.
Yeah.
It's easy to get so caught up in everyday life that we lose sight of the big picture.
Yeah.
The principles that should be guiding us.
Coolly.
Goethe seems to be reminding us that true strength comes from being true to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
not from giving in to pressure from the outside.
Yeah, even when it's tough.
All right, so we've covered some pretty heavy stuff about human nature and this whole tension between authenticity and conformity.
Right.
What about something a little lighter?
Well, Goethe had some pretty interesting thoughts on passion,
Okay.
which, is always a topic that gets people talking.
Mm.
In Maxims 21, 22, and 23, he really digs into the two sides of passion, how it can both lift us up and tear us down.
Yeah, he actually compares passions to a phoenix, constantly being reborn from the ashes.
It is, yeah.
That's a pretty powerful image.
It is a powerful image, and it captures both the beauty and the danger of those really intense emotions.
Yeah.
On the one hand, passion is what drives creativity, our drive, and those amazing experiences that make life worth living.
Right.
But on the other hand, it can consume us, lead us to do reckless things, and become an obsession that ultimately just brings pain.
So how do we find that balance? How do we tap into that power without letting it control us?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't think Goethe gives us a simple answer.
Right.
He recognizes how complex human emotions are, how they can both empower us and hold us back.
Mm.
Maybe the key is self-awareness.
Okay.
Recognizing our own patterns and tendencies and figuring out healthy ways to express our passions without letting them run wild.
That makes sense, and it kind of ties into what he says in Maxim 24 about the risks of confiding in the people we're close to.
Oh, right, yeah.
He talks about how it can be a relief to share our feelings,
Hmm.
but there's also this danger of revealing too much, like burdening those we care about with all our emotional baggage.
It's that classic dilemma, isn't it?
Yeah.
How much do we share and who do we share it with?
Hmm.
How do we balance the need to connect with the desire to protect ourselves and the people we love?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is.
And maybe there's no one right answer, just a constant process of navigating those complexities, right?
Yeah, and finding what works for us in each relationship.
We're getting deep here.
I know, right?
And this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Goethe's thoughts on human nature and passion.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? What other gems are hidden in these pages?
Well, let's shift gears a little and talk about error.
Okay.
Not the kind you find in a computer program, but the kind we all make as humans.
Right.
Those mistakes and missteps that can sometimes feel like roadblocks.
Yeah.
Goethe had a lot to say about this, and some of his ideas might surprise you.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Tell me more about Goethe's take on error. What did he see as the downsides and maybe the unexpected upsides of making mistakes?
Well, let's start with Maxim 67.
Right.
It suggests that we often get stuck in these errors, clinging to beliefs or relationships that aren't good for us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's that feeling of being trapped, something's not working, but you're scared to let go.
Oh, that's so relatable.
Right,
I think
yeah.
we've all been there. That
Yeah.
feeling of knowing you need to change, but just being frozen by fear or uncertainty.
Totally.
So what's Goethe's solution? How do we break free from these traps we create for ourselves?
Well, here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Goethe suggests that even errors can push us to take action.
Okay.
And sometimes those actions have surprisingly positive results.
So interesting.
It's like that saying, sometimes you got to hit rock bottom before you can bounce back.
So he's saying even our mistakes have a purpose.
Yeah.
Like they can actually be what helps us grow and change.
Exactly. It's a totally different way of looking at things,
Oh.
right? Instead of seeing errors as just bad, we can start to see them as chances to learn and correct course.
Right.
Maybe those wrong turns and dead ends are actually leading us somewhere better, even if we can't see it yet.
Have you ever had that in your own life?
Oh, for sure.
Making a mistake that turned out to be a good thing in the end.
Absolutely. I think most of us can relate to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes those moments when we fail or get disappointed are the very things that make us rethink our priorities,
Right.
step outside our comfort zones and ultimately discover something new and amazing about ourselves.
That's a great way to reframe those experiences.
Yeah.
It makes me think about how hard we are on ourselves for our mistakes.
Hmm.
Maybe we need to be a little kinder to ourselves and realize those errors are part of learning.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's about embracing those imperfections, the stumbles along the way, and recognizing that they're all part of what makes us human.
Right.
And who knows, maybe those imperfections are what lead us to our greatest successes.
Okay, so errors can be motivating, a reason for change.
Mm-hmm.
But what about those times when we set our sights on goals that are just too big?
Yeah.
Goethe has some thoughts on that too, right?
He does.
Specifically, I think it was Maxim 68.
Yes, you're right.
It's about that frustration of chasing those impossible dreams, the ones that make you feel like Sisyphus, pushing that boulder uphill only to have it roll right back down.
Exactly.
It's a struggle we all face, right?
Yeah.
That feeling of reaching for something that always seems out of reach.
Like hitting a wall.
Yeah, you put in all that work, but you see little to no progress.
Yeah,
It can be so discouraging.
it really can.
So what does Goethe say about this? Does he offer any comfort or advice for those of us dealing with these, Sisyphean struggles?
His perspective on this might surprise you.
Okay.
He suggests that even in those seemingly pointless pursuits, we discover new desires along the way.
Oh, interesting.
Things we might not have even known we wanted.
So it's not really about reaching the initial goal, but about what we learn and who we become in the process.
Exactly.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
Yeah.
And sometimes those detours and unexpected turns take us to something even better than what we originally planned. Love that.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even when things don't go as planned, there's still something valuable in the effort, in the experience itself.
Absolutely.
And it makes me think about how quickly we give up on things sometimes without realizing that the best rewards might be just around the corner.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to embrace the uncertainty, the not knowing,
Yeah.
and trust that the path will unfold the way it's supposed to.
Right.
And who knows? Maybe those seemingly impossible goals were never meant to be reached. Maybe they were just there to lead us towards something greater.
This is kind of blowing my mind. It's like Goethe is giving us permission to let go of those rigid expectations and embrace the unexpected twists and turns of life.
He is, and he's reminding us that there's beauty in the journey.
Yeah.
Even when it's messy and unpredictable.
Yeah.
He's challenging us to find contentment in the process, not just in the outcome.
All right, so we've talked about human nature, passion, and the surprising benefits of error and even failure.
Right.
What's next on our Goethean adventure?
Well, let's shift gears a bit and talk about art.
Okay.
Goethe was a bit of a Renaissance man himself.
Right.
Writer, poet, scientist, philosopher. And he had some pretty strong opinions about the art of his time.
Ooh, bring on the controversy.
Right.
What kind of truth bombs did Goethe drop on the art world?
He didn't hold back.
Okay.
In Maxims 75, he famously said that Germans take pleasure in art that is unsure of itself. It was a bold statement.
Yeah.
A critique of what he saw as this tendency to value uncertainty and ambiguity over true skill and confidence.
So he's saying that people were mistaking self-doubt for profundity.
Yeah.
Like they thought hesitation meant depth.
That's how I interpret it, yeah.
Interesting.
He seems to be saying that real art comes from a place of conviction, from a clear vision and a confident execution.
Yeah.
It's not about second-guessing yourself or trying to please everyone.
Right.
It's about expressing your own unique view with boldness and clarity.
That's a powerful message for any artist.
It is, yeah.
To trust your gut, to silence those inner critics, and to create from a place of authenticity, no matter what others might think.
Absolutely.
It's about having the courage to be true to your vision.
Yeah.
Even if it goes against the grain or challenges the norm.
And that's a message that goes way beyond just art.
Right. It's a message for all of us.
Exactly.
To embrace our individuality, own our unique perspective, and express ourselves in the world with confidence and authenticity.
You got it.
Yeah.
And Goethe doesn't stop there. He goes on to emphasize that the artist's duty is to create what they believe is right.
Yeah.
Not what's expected or popular.
That's Maxim 77, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like he's saying that true art is a form of rebellion.
Yeah.
Like rejecting conformity in favor of personal expression.
Exactly. It's about challenging the status quo, pushing boundaries, and creating something that's both meaningful and true to yourself.
Right.
No matter what the critics might say.
He uses a really interesting example to illustrate this.
Oh, yeah.
In Maxim 63, he talks about Raphael's tapestry.
Right.
The one depicting the adoration of the kings.
Mm.
What's so special about this particular artwork?
Well, Goethe highlights its naive charm.
Okay.
And how it manages to depict a whole world without any moral conflict. He's drawn to its simplicity, its sincerity, and its ability to connect with people across cultures and time periods.
So he's saying it's not about technical skill or how complex it is,
Right.
but about the genuine expression of the artist's vision,
Exactly.
regardless of how it's received.
Precisely. Goethe believed that true art is like a force of nature, something that flows from the artist's soul, It's unburdened by the need for approval from others.
Wow, that's giving me a whole new way to think about art.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About what we value in art and how those values are shaped by our own culture and historical context.
It does. It makes me want to go back and look at some of the art I've dismissed in the past.
Yeah.
Maybe with fresh eyes and a more open mind.
That's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to how Goethe's insights can challenge our assumptions and make us see the world in new ways.
Okay, so we've talked about human nature, passion, error, and even art.
Right.
I'm starting to see how these seemingly random topics are all connected. Like, they all reflect Goethe's overall philosophy of life.
Yeah.
What other areas did he explore in his maxims and reflections?
Well, another fascinating thread that runs through these maxims is his exploration of language, truth, and perception. He was really fascinated by the power of words to shape how we understand the world. But he was also aware of their limitations.
Right. After all, he was a master of language himself.
He was.
So what were some of his key insights on this?
One of his most interesting observations is in Maxim 188,
Okay.
where he argues that words and images are deeply connected, always seeking each other out, like metaphors and comparisons.
Like they're two sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Each one making the other richer and more meaningful.
Right. And this highlights how language can create pictures in our minds and build a sense of shared understanding.
Exactly.
But he also points out how people struggle to actually apply truth, even when it's simple.
Right.
And how partial truths can lead to what he calls dazzling error. Those are Maxims 116 and 146.
Yeah.
It's like we get blinded by the shiny parts and miss the bigger picture.
Totally. And it reminds us to be critical thinkers.
Yeah.
To question what we see and hear.
Right.
And always try to understand things on a deeper level, even when it's tough or makes us uncomfortable.
He uses some really striking examples to get this point across.
He does, yeah.
Like, snow is a fictitious cleanliness. And we only possess what we understand.
Right.
Maxims 127 and 106.
Yeah, those are real head scratchers.
It are. They make us look past surface appearances and really dig into the essence of things.
Exactly.
What looks clean might not actually be pure.
Right.
And what we own might not really be ours if we don't get it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by all this depth thinking. Maybe it's time for a break.
Actually, before we take a break,
okay,
I think it would be helpful to connect these ideas about language and truth back to what we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
About human nature and our tendency to fool ourselves.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So you're saying that how we use language can actually make our delusions worse?
Yeah.
Like we can trap ourselves in these webs of words that hide the truth.
Exactly. It's like we can convince ourselves of anything if we use the right words, even if those words don't match up with reality.
That's a little scary, but also incredibly insightful. It makes me think about how often we use language to manipulate or deceive both ourselves and other people.
Right. And it reminds us to be careful with the power of language, to use it responsibly, and to always aim for clarity and honesty in how we communicate.
This is heavy stuff.
It is.
Maybe we should take a break after all.
Yeah.
Give our listeners some time to process all these profound insights.
Sounds like a good plan. Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking during that last bit about something you said, about how easy it is to get caught up in the day-to-day and kind of lose sight of the big picture.
Oh, yeah. I think that's something we all struggle with at some point, right? It's easy to get bogged down in the details and forget about the things that really matter.
Exactly. And it got me thinking about Goethe's reflections on history and legacy. About how our lives are both shaped by and contribute to the larger human experience.
You're making me think of Maxim 167.
Okay.
Where he says, we live on the past and perish by the past.
Right.
It's such a strong statement.
It is.
I'm not totally sure what he meant by that.
It's definitely one of those maxims that has a lot of different interpretations.
Right.
But I think at its heart, it's acknowledging that life is cyclical. How the past isn't something we just leave behind.
Yeah.
It keeps influencing us, whether we realize it or not.
So it's like we're carrying the weight of history with us.
Yeah.
Even as we're trying to create our own path forward.
Exactly. And those paths are never entirely our own, right? They're shaped by the experiences of those who came before us, by the culture and the rules of society we inherit.
Yeah.
And by the choices we make in response to all those things.
That's a lot to think about.
It is, yeah.
And it makes me wonder about the concept of legacy. Like what we leave behind for the next generations.
Right.
What do you think Goethe would say about that?
Well, he doesn't directly address legacy in these maxims.
Okay.
But I think there are hints throughout.
Okay.
Like in Maxim 259, he talks about how getting older often means taking on new roles and responsibilities.
Right. It's like as we age, we're not just getting older, we're also gathering experiences and wisdom that we can pass on to others.
Exactly. And that makes me think of something else you mentioned.
Okay.
About how Goethe observed that old people lose the right to be judged by their peers.
Yeah, Maxim 371.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective on aging and how social perception changes.
It is.
It almost suggests that as people gain more experience, they move beyond the need for approval from their peers.
Yeah, maybe because their perspectives have broadened, their priorities have shifted. They're not so focused on fitting in or meeting societal expectations anymore.
That's a very insightful interpretation, and it challenges us to rethink how we view and treat people in different stages of life. Instead of dismissing older generations as out of touch.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be seeking their wisdom and guidance, recognizing that they have a unique point of view that can enrich our own understanding.
That's a good point, especially in a culture that often values youth and newness above all else.
Yeah.
But, it's not just about learning from those who are older than us.
Right.
I think Goethe would also encourage us to learn from the past in general, from history, literature, all the wisdom humanity has gathered.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to his observations about language and truth.
Yeah.
He understood that words have the power to pass knowledge down through generations.
Right.
To connect us to the past and to shape how we see the present.
And speaking of connecting to the past,
Yeah.
let's not forget Goethe's fascination with nature.
Right.
And his approach to science. We touched on this briefly before.
Yeah.
But I'd love to dive a little deeper into his scientific mind.
Me too. It's often overlooked.
Yeah.
But Goethe was a keen observer of the natural world.
Yeah.
And he made significant contributions to botany.
Right.
Among other areas.
Yeah. And his approach to science was really connected to his philosophical and artistic views.
It was. And, we talked about how he believed that nature grows dumb when subjected to torture.
Right. Maxim 115.
He was skeptical of those super-theoretical approaches that separated scientific inquiry from actual experience and experimentation.
Exactly.
He had this deep respect for nature, and he advocated for a more holistic approach.
Yeah.
One that combined careful observation with an intuitive understanding of how everything's connected.
I remember how he talked about his lifelong interest in nature in Maxim 401.
Oh, right.
How he eagerly kept up with new discoveries and almost made some big breakthroughs himself.
Yeah.
He clearly never lost that childlike sense of wonder.
Yeah, it wasn't just a hobby for him.
Right.
His study of nature was a lifelong passion.
Yeah.
And it really influenced his writing, his art, and his whole perspective on the world.
But he was also critical of what he saw as too much reliance on theories in science.
He was, yeah.
In Maxim 430, he calls for pathological experimental physics.
Right.
Which, I gotta admit, sounds kind of intimidating.
It does sound a bit intense. But I think what he meant was that he wanted to bring scientific inquiry back to the real observable world.
Okay.
He was wary of theories that got too abstract, too disconnected from the actual things they were trying to explain.
So for Goethe, it wasn't about choosing sides between observation and theory,
Right.
but about finding a balance between the two.
Exactly.
A kind of harmony between what we can see and what we intuit.
Precisely. And this approach really aligns with his overall philosophy.
Right.
This belief in the interconnectedness of everything.
Yeah.
He saw the same principles at work in nature, in art, in human behavior, even the way we think.
This is reminding me of how he talked about the relationship between language and imagery, how words and perceptions are constantly influencing each other.
Exactly, and this interconnectedness, this constant back and forth between different areas of thought and experience, is what makes his maxims and reflections so fascinating and relevant.
It's like he's giving us a peek inside his own mind.
Yeah.
A mind that was always looking for connections, patterns, and those underlying principles.
Mm-hmm.
It's inspiring, but also a little overwhelming.
I get that, but I think that's part of what's so great about engaging with Goethe's work. He doesn't give us easy answers or neat conclusions.
Yeah.
He challenges us to think for ourselves, to question our assumptions, and to embrace the complexity of the world.
And to find our own meaning within that complexity.
You got it. And that's something we could all benefit from.
Yeah.
No matter our background or beliefs.
Okay, I'm starting to feel like we could talk about this forever.
Me too.
Just dissecting each maxim and finding new layers of meaning.
Yeah. But unfortunately, we are getting close to the end of our deep dive today.
Okay.
Let's see if we can bring everything together in the next section and leave our listeners with something to think about.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. It's amazing how Goethe's mind worked, connecting everything from human nature to art to science, even to the very nature of knowledge itself.
It really is remarkable how he was able to weave together these seemingly separate topics into one coherent view of the world.
Yeah, and, as we've been talking about his insights, I keep coming back to this idea of interconnectedness.
Yes, that's a recurring theme for sure.
He saw connections everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
Between the inner and outer worlds, between the past, present, and future, between different fields of knowledge.
Exactly, and it makes me think about how we often compartmentalize our own lives, We separate our work from our personal life, our intellectual pursuits from our emotions.
Right.
Goethe seemed to approach life with a sense of wholeness, recognizing that all these parts of ourselves are intertwined.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
It's like he's encouraging us to break down those artificial barriers and embrace the full spectrum of human experience.
He is. And it's not just about embracing that fullness within ourselves.
Right.
It's also about recognizing the interconnectedness of everything.
Yeah.
The way our actions ripple outward and affect the world around us.
That's a powerful thought.
It is.
It reminds us that we're not just isolated individuals, but part of a larger web of relationships and systems.
Exactly. And that awareness brings with it a sense of responsibility, don't you think?
It does.
Recognizing that our choices matter, not just for us, but for everyone.
Yeah, it's a call to be more mindful, more intentional in our actions, and to think about the long-term consequences of what we do.
You know, it's funny, as we've been discussing Goethe's Maxims and Reflections,
Yeah.
I've noticed myself becoming more observant.
Yeah.
More tuned in to those subtle details and connections I might have missed before.
I've noticed that too.
Yeah.
It's like he's sharpened our senses, made us more aware of the beauty and complexity of the world.
He has, and that, I think, is one of the greatest gifts he gives us through these writings. He's not just giving us information, he's inviting us to see the world in a new way.
Right.
To approach life with curiosity and wonder.
And to never stop learning, questioning, and seeking a deeper understanding.
Exactly. To embrace the mystery, the things we can't fully explain or measure.
Yeah.
And to find joy in the very act of seeking knowledge.
It's a beautiful way to live, isn't it?
It is.
Always learning, always growing, always trying to make sense of this crazy, complicated, and ultimately awe-inspiring world.
It is. And I think this is a testament to how powerful Goethe's work is, that it can still inspire us centuries later.
Yeah.
These maxims aren't just relics from the past. They're living, breathing insights that can still guide us today.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main takeaway? What do you hope our listeners will take with them from exploring Goethe's wisdom?
Well, if I had to pick one overarching message, it would be this: to live a more examined life, to become more self-aware, to embrace the interconnectedness of everything, and to never stop searching for knowledge and meaning.
Those are powerful words to live by.
They are.
And I think Goethe would agree that the real work starts now.
Yeah.
As we take these insights and apply them to our own lives, our own struggles, and our own unique journeys.
You got it. And that's the beauty of this, isn't it? The conversation doesn't stop here.
Right.
It continues within each of us as we think about these ideas and make them part of our own understanding of the world.
So to our listeners, we encourage you to go back to Goethe's Maxims and Reflections. See what resonates with you, what challenges you, what sparks your curiosity.
Yeah.
And most importantly, ask yourself how you can apply these insights to your own life.
If we could leave you with one final thought from Goethe,
Okay.
one that might inspire further reflection,
Yeah.
it would be this. If every phenomenon is interconnected, how can we better understand the web of relationships that shape our lives and the world around us?
That's a beautiful and thought-provoking question to consider. We hope this deep dive has given you some tools and perspectives to start exploring that question. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yes.
Until next time, keep diving deep.